She dangled from the twisted tree, arms bound high above her head with sacred vines slicked in her own blood. Her violet skin was streaked with dirt and bruises, her silver eyes dull but defiant as she watched the creatures slink closer. The Gulkins circled in silence, six-legged beasts with slick black hides that shimmered with internal heat. Their nostrils flared as they caught the scent of her fear, drawn to it like insects to light. She had been left here, offered, they said, to appease the Ancient Ones. A noble sacrifice for peace. But there would be no peace. Only feeding. The Lys Rayla, once a noble heir of House Rayla, now hung like carrion in the heart of Verona X's jungle, her own people whispering prayers as they abandoned her. They feared the Gulkin more than they valued her truth. She had uncovered their crimes, plans to enslave the sunborn Ellerin species. For that she was deemed dangerous. Expendable. And the jungle would clean up their shame. As the lead Gulkin unhinged its jaw, its teeth glistening like broken glass, a sound cracked through the forest. Crunch. It was not the sound of the Gulkin's advance. It was heavier, more deliberate. Boots. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Then, without warning, it burst forward. The Gulkin turned just in time to be met with a blur of motion, metal slamming into flesh, the dull crack of something important breaking. A massive figure, armored in a black exosuit laced with pulsing red veins, drove a fist straight through the leader's throat. The Gulkin gurgled once, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle, then collapsed in a heap. The others hissed, withdrawing cautiously. This wasn't part of the ritual. He stood tall, the human. Over 6 feet of war-forged muscle, dusted in blood and rain. His face was partly hidden under a scratched visor, but the fire in his eyes pierced through, eyes that glowed with the aftermath of too many enhancements. He turned slowly toward the hanging woman. The Lys blinked, stunned. She'd heard stories, ghost tales whispered in scared alien circles. The ghost of Helion Crater. A human monster who survived the fall of Earth's last outpost, and now haunted the jungle moons, killing beasts and tribes alike. But she hadn't believed those stories. Until now. "You're not from around here," the man said. His voice was deep, laced with static and gravel. He crouched beside the corpse of the Gulkin, wiping his gauntlet on its slimy hide, then looked up at her. "Hell of a place to hang out." She tried to respond, but her throat was dry. Blood loss. Exhaustion. Rage. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the vines holding her up. With a hiss, a plasma knife flicked from his wrist. He sliced the bindings clean in one swift movement, catching her as she fell forward into his arms. "Easy. You're safe now." His voice had shifted, still rough but softer. The Lys struggled weakly, trying to push him away. "Why?" she rasped. "Why help me?" He paused. A faint smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Because monsters don't get to eat angels." She blinked again, more in confusion than anything else. Her limbs trembled. Her pride wanted to spit in his face, but her instincts clung to his warmth. "I'm Kale," he added. "Kale Maddox." "The Lys," she whispered, her voice barely audible. His brows lifted slightly, recognizing the name. "From Rayla House? Guess you pissed someone off pretty bad." She gave a bitter chuckle, coughing from the effort. "They call it sacrifice. I call it betrayal." "Same difference," he muttered, slinging her over his shoulder. "Let's move before their backup arrives." Kale strode into the jungle, unafraid of the whispering branches or glowing insects that scattered at his feet. The Lys could barely keep her eyes open. But one thought pulsed in her mind through the fog of pain and disbelief. A human had saved her life. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The jungle was alive with movement. Every vine, every rustling leaf seemed to pulse with awareness, like the forest itself was watching them. Kale moved fast, silent but brutal, carving a path through the underbrush with a blade that shimmered in unnatural hues. The Lys clung to consciousness, jostled over his shoulder, her thoughts blurred between shame, pain, and a rising confusion that felt far too much like hope. She had never known a human, not truly. Her people had told stories of them. Violent, unstable, selfish. useful as tools of war once, then dangerous as unchecked fire. The Federation had abandoned them here, on forgotten moons like Veruna X, where the jungle devoured history and left only rumor. That one of them would dare interfere with a Gulkan offering. Unthinkable. Put me down, she finally croaked. No, Kale replied without slowing. I can walk. You can't stand. She hated that he was right. Her pride burned hotter than the sun-choked canopy above them, but her body refused to cooperate. Still she squirmed and he sighed. Gently he lowered her beside a moss-covered stump beneath a hanging tangle of orange-leafed vines. The moment her feet touched the ground, her knees buckled. Kale caught her again. Told you. She glared at him. You're an arrogant savage. Nice to meet you too, princess. He sat back on his heels, scanning the treetops. We've got less than 10 minutes before those things regroup. They'll track the scent. What scent? Fear. Yours. Maybe mine too. I'm not afraid. Kale gave her a long look. Then you're dumber than you look. She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she bit her tongue and focused on the swelling ache in her ribs. What are you doing here? She asked finally. You're human. Your kind doesn't belong in this part of the sector. He smirked. Neither do you. I was salvaging tech near the crater when I picked up the ritual beacon. I don't usually get involved in alien drama, but when I saw what they tied to the tree, he shrugged. Figured I'd do something stupid. Delise narrowed her eyes. So this is a hobby for you? Saving strangers? Kale's smile faded. No. Usually I'm too busy staying alive. There was a long pause. The forest around them hissed and clicked, insects singing in rhythms she didn't recognize. Somewhere distant, a low howl rose into the air, answered by 3 short guttural calls. The pack is splitting, Kale muttered. Smart bastards. They'll try to cut us off from the river. We need to move then. Not yet. He reached into his belt and pulled a small metal cylinder. It unfolded into a floating orb, which began spinning silently. Drone will scan a clear path. We move when I say. Delise watched him work, mesmerized by the way he moved, deliberate, sure, efficient. Not just a warrior but something colder, more precise. Like the war had melted the man and poured him into armor. You're enhanced, she said softly. Cybernetic. He nodded, eyes still on the drone's readings. Yeah. Upgraded spine, ocular relay, neural map. All experimental. Painful as hell. Why? He paused. Because it was that or let a colony die on Helion. I volunteered. She blinked. That wasn't the story she'd been told. She'd heard Kale Maddox was a rogue commander who disobeyed orders, sacrificed half his squad and vanished. You're not what I expected. I get that a lot. He looked at her again. And you? Noblewoman. Psychic training. Why did your own house throw you to the wolves? Delise hesitated. Because I saw something they didn't want me to see. Slavers masquerading as diplomats. They offered peace talks and prepared chains. Kale nodded slowly. That'll do it. The orb beeped twice, clear signal. He stood and extended a hand. She took it despite herself. Where are we going? There's a cave near the river. Dry. Shielded from Gulkan sonar. They moved together now, slower but more in sync. Kale kept a hand on his sidearm, his other brushing aside vines and thorn fronds. Delise walked beside him, trying not to lean too much on his shoulder. Her strength returned little by little, but exhaustion still clawed at her thoughts. At one point she stumbled. Kale caught her again, steadying her with one arm around her waist. I don't need your help, she whispered. You're getting it anyway. His voice wasn't mocking this time. Just firm. They reached the cave as night began to fall, the twin moons rising over the trees like pale, watchful eyes. Inside the air was cooler, tinged with minerals and the faint scent of something metallic. Kale activated a small heat lamp and set it on the floor. The glow bathed the cave in orange light. The Lys sat against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. Kale took a seat across from her, unslinging a battered rifle and checking its power core. "You never asked what the creatures were going to do to me," she said. "I didn't need to. Most people would." Kale didn't look up. "Most people are broken. You deserved better." A silence stretched between them, heavy, strange, comforting in its raw honesty. The Lys looked at him, really looked at him. The scar beneath his jaw, the calloused hands, the haunted flicker behind his enhancements. There was pain there and guilt. But also fire. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kale finally looked back, one corner of his mouth tilting into a half-smile. "Get some rest, the Lys. Tomorrow we find a way off this moon. One where no one ties you to a tree again." And as the jungle hissed outside and her thoughts began to slow, the Lys realized something terrifying. She trusted him. A human. And that terrified her more than the Gulkin ever had. The night on Veruna X was far from silent. Even within the cave, the jungle's voice whispered through cracks in the stone, long drawn-out chirps, distant howls, the rustling of thick foliage disturbed by unseen feet. But inside, within the bubble of firelight and flickering shadows, it felt like the world had stilled, if only for a moment. The Lys couldn't sleep. Her body begged for rest, but her mind refused. Kale had dozed off, his rifle still cradled across his chest, head tilted back against the stone wall. The glow of the heat lamp cast a soft amber halo around him, revealing the jagged scar trailing from the corner of his eye to his jawline. Even in sleep his jaw remained tight, like war still gripped him in dreams. She stared at him for too long. What was she doing? She was an heir of Rayla, raised in crystalline towers under psychic tutors and royal protocol. She debated senators, brokered peace treaties, danced with diplomats under golden chandeliers, and now here she was, curled beside a cave wall, watching a human mercenary sleep like he was the last safe thing in the galaxy. It wasn't just the danger of her situation that made Kale compelling. It was his choice, to save her when he had every reason not to. And now, despite how their worlds had been raised to hate each other, despite the crimes their species had committed against one another, she found herself wanting to know him. The moment shattered with a sudden click. Kale's eyes snapped open. His arm swung up, aiming the rifle toward the cave entrance. "Movement," he growled, already on his feet. The Lys stood too, heart racing. It could be a scout. Kale adjusted a dial on the rifle, scanning the shadows. "No. They don't move this quiet." A soft vibration trembled through the floor. Then another. The Lys's breath caught in her throat. "Footsteps," she whispered. "Heavy ones." Kale looked at her. "You said Rayla was working with slavers. What kind?" "Venrati shock troops. Genetic warbreeds. Loyal to the highest bidder." Kale cursed under his breath. "They followed your house's signal. Probably think I took their prize." A sharp hiss filled the air, followed by the rhythmic thud-thud of metallic feet against jungle stone. Then a voice, modulated and deep, called out from just outside the cave. "Return the asset. You will not be harmed." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Asset?" The Lys clenched her fists. "They always reduce us to that." He turned to her. "How many?" "Usually operate in triads. 2 brutes, 1 command drone." Kale nodded, tossing her a compact energy pistol. "Shoot if you have to. Stay behind me otherwise." Before she could protest, a white-hot bolt exploded against the edge of the cave mouth, sending shards of stone scattering. Kale rolled forward, returned fire and caught one of the Venrati clean in the chest. The creature staggered, snarling, its armor sparking as it fell back. Another shot hissed past the Lys's head. She ducked and returned fire, grazing the second brute's thigh. It screamed, the sound more animal than machine, and charged forward. Kale met it head-on. His fist collided with the brute's shoulder, denting the armor, then twisted beneath its retaliatory swing and rammed his knee into its chest plate. The Lys watched in awe. He fought like an extension of the jungle itself. Fast, wild, unrelenting. But the Venrati weren't slow. The second one lunged behind Kale, swinging a serrated blade at his back. Valise raised the pistol and fired, striking the brute in the side of the head. It didn't kill him, but it staggered him long enough for Kale to twist and bury his knife under its chin. Blood, thick, dark, and acidic, splattered the cave wall. The third enemy, a command drone, hovered into view, spinning blades glowing red-hot. Its synthetic voice crackled. Final warning. You are in violation of Accord 7. Surrender the Ellerin Noble. Kale didn't answer. He took one step forward and fired straight into the drone's optics. The explosion rocked the entrance. When the smoke cleared, the jungle outside was eerily quiet. No more footsteps. No more hissing. Kale exhaled and lowered his weapon. They're done. Valise stared at the carnage. You killed Venrati like they were nothing. He glanced at her. They bleed like everything else. But you didn't run. You didn't hide. You fought for me. Kale shrugged. They wanted to hurt you. That's enough for me. A lump formed in her throat. That's not normal. Not for anyone, let alone someone like you. Kale hesitated. You want the truth? I didn't just pick up your distress beacon. I tracked it. I'd heard whispers of an Ellerin noble going rogue. I thought maybe you had something worth saving. And now? He looked at her, really looked. Now I know you're worth it. Her heart skipped. The firelight caught his features in a way that made her forget for a moment that he was human, and she was not. That their worlds were fractured, their people's enemies. All she saw was him. She crossed the distance between them slowly, eyes never leaving his. If we leave this planet, Kale, they'll hunt us. My house, your enemies, maybe even both our species. I know. And you still want to take me with you? He didn't blink. I'd burn 10 worlds if it meant keeping you safe. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Of danger. Of possibility. Of something new blooming in the heart of destruction. She reached out and this time he didn't pull away. Outside the jungle whispered on, but within the cave everything was still. Tomorrow they would run. But tonight, they had found something worth bleeding for. Dawn broke like fire through the canopy. Golden rays cutting through mist, painting the jungle floor in bands of orange and red. Valise stirred beside Kale, her head resting against his chest, the slow thud of his heartbeat grounding her more than she expected. In the light, the scars across his body were clearer, some old and pale, others red and angry. He wore them like medals without pride, each one a story he didn't bother telling. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake him. But his eyes opened anyway, sharp and alert. A soldier's reflex. Didn't mean to wake you, she whispered. You didn't. His voice was gravel and warmth. I don't sleep much anyway. Nightmares. Memories. She nodded. Me too. For a moment they just watched each other, caught in the quiet before the storm. Because they both knew it was coming. We can't run forever, she said. I know. And we can't stay here. Nope. Then what's the plan? Kale stood, stretching the tension from his shoulders. My ship's about 80 clicks east. Hidden in a ravine. If we can make it there, we can leave this moon. And go where? He turned to her. Wherever you want. She blinked. No one had ever said that to her before, not as a suggestion. Not as a choice. Not her choice. But before she could answer, a sharp buzz crackled through the cave. Kale's drone, forgotten since the night before, flashed a red warning light. He grabbed it, eyes narrowing. What is it? Valise asked, standing. Kale's voice was tight. Federation signal. 2 dropships inbound. Not Gulkin. Not slavers. Something else. Valise paled. My house. Coming to finish what they started? Or to take me back, and make sure I never speak again? Kale checked his rifle. Then we move. Now. They were out of the cave within seconds, sprinting through the jungle, adrenaline sharpening every sound. Behind them the air grew heavier, the unmistakable whump-whump-whump of dropship engines cutting through the canopy like thunder. As they ran, Valise spoke through panting breaths. My people will come with cloaked scouts. Energy nets. Psy jammers. Got it. Kale tossed her a second pistol. Stick close. Watch my left. She smiled through the fear. I already was. They moved like a single unit, him carving the path, her covering the rear. When the first scout dropped from the trees, invisible to the eye but not to her sharpened senses, she called out and fired. The cloaking shimmer shattered with a blast of light, and Kale finished the soldier with a blade to the gut. They didn't stop. More shadows moved through the trees. Figures in Ellerin armor, fast and silent. But not fast enough. Kale was a blur of motion and instinct, a dance of brutality and protection. Lise watched him take a shot to the shoulder without flinching, then drop two attackers with precise strikes. They dove into a ravine as plasma fire lit up the trees behind them. We're close, Kale shouted, skidding to a stop beside a rock formation. He pressed his hand to a concealed panel, and a section of earth shifted, revealing the hull of a sleek dark vessel hidden beneath vines and camouflage netting. The ship hissed open. Inside it was cramped, functional and battle-scarred. Lise collapsed into the co-pilot seat while Kale sealed the ramp. The hum of systems awakening filled the air. They'll follow, she said. They can try. The engines roared to life. As they lifted off, trees bent and cracked beneath the force. Kale angled the ship up through the narrow clearing, just as a second dropship descended toward them, its weapons charged. Lise reached out with her mind, grabbing the targeting feed, twisting it with a raw force her tutors had tried to suppress for years. The enemy guns jammed. The dropship stalled. Kale hooped and punched them into orbit. Space stretched before them, cold and vast and free. Lise sat back, trembling. Kale glanced over. You good? She nodded. I didn't know I could do that. Guess we're both full of surprises. They broke atmosphere, stars blooming in the black. Alarms faded. Silence returned. Kale leaned back, finally letting out a breath. Well, that was fun. Lise laughed, breathless. Your idea of fun needs work. He turned toward her, more serious now. We're not safe yet. But you have a choice now. I won't make it for you. She looked out the viewport, at the stars stretching forever. I don't want to go back, she said quietly. I want to find a place where I'm not a pawn. Not a symbol. Just me. Kale reached over and took her hand. Then let's find it. Together. For the first time in her life, Lise felt like she wasn't running from something, but toward it. Toward freedom. Toward fire. Toward a man who didn't see her as royalty or liability, but something more. Maybe even something worth fighting a galaxy for. The stars shimmered in the void as Kale's ship slipped into the edge of a forgotten sector, uncharted, unclaimed, and off every major grid. The space around them was littered with ancient wreckage, old war debris drifting in silence like ghosts of conflicts no one remembered. It was a perfect hiding place, and a perfect beginning. Lise stood in the narrow corridor just behind the cockpit, hands braced against the cold metal walls. She watched Kale pilot in silence, his movements precise, his face unreadable under the glow of the console lights. She'd spent weeks beside him now, fighting, fleeing, bleeding, and yet there was still so much of him that felt like locked steel. But there were cracks. And she was learning how to slip between them. I've been thinking, she said softly. Kale didn't look away from the controls. Dangerous habit. We need to strike first. Now he looked. Strike? Against who? Because I've got a long list. Against the ones who sold me out. My own house. My name, my blood, they used it as a leash. I won't run anymore. Kale considered her, then leaned back in the pilot's seat. You're not a soldier, Lise. I wasn't. But I'm not helpless. I've seen what they've done to people like me. I've seen the cages. The burning. I've felt the collars. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. And I've seen what someone like you can do when you decide something is worth protecting. He looked at her in silence, eyes narrowing. You want revenge? He asked. No. I want justice. And I want to make sure they can't do to anyone else what they did to me. We do that by exposing them. Breaking their hold. Cale's hand drifted to the scar along his jaw. That's a war. Yes, she whispered. But it doesn't have to be a losing one. They plotted their next move in the ship's war room, an old repurposed cargo bay now littered with stolen tech and stolen dreams. Cale laid out blueprints of Ellerin comm hubs. Valise mapped political connections, names she once called cousins, now enemies. As they worked, the distance between them closed, no longer soldier and survivor but partners. Equals. More. The mission was simple in theory, impossible in practice. Infiltrate the high orbitary above Rayla's moon, extract house records, and leak the truth across the neutral systems. The station was guarded by loyalists, scanners, and layered AI protocols. They'd need stealth, speed, and a hell of a distraction. Cale handled that part. 2 weeks later, the station burst into chaos. Explosions rocked the docking bays and power flickered through the upper sectors. Cale's distraction squad, former mercs, exiles, people who owed him favors, tore through security checkpoints like wildfire. Valise moved like smoke through the halls, disguised in Ellerin armor, her psionic signature dampened. She reached the data core alone, slipped past the biolocks and stared down the control node. Inside it, every dirty secret. The slaver deals. The experiments. The lists of others like her, disappeared, sold, dissected. She downloaded it all. Then hesitated. Her father's name was on the authorizations. Her brother's signature marked the contracts. They hadn't just sold her out. They'd built the system on her. Cale's voice crackled in her earpiece. You good? She blinked, then nodded. I'm done. Meet me at the breach point. The station shook again. Sirens screamed. Cale was waiting, rifle hot, grin wild. You get what we need. She held up the drive. More than that. I got everything. They barely made it out. Their exit path was compromised, and Cale took a pulse round to the ribs shielding her. But they escaped, bleeding, laughing, fire behind them, stars ahead. The data went viral across the outer systems. Independent channels picked it up first, then sympathetic Ellerin enclaves, then the Federation. Protests turned into riots. Noble houses turned on each other. Slaver networks began to fracture. A revolution had begun. Cale lay in the medbay days later, patched up but pale. Valise sat beside him, her hand on his. You should have let me take that hit, she whispered. You're too important, he murmured. No, she said. We are. His fingers curled around hers. Where do we go now? Valise smiled. We build. Something new. Something better. And for the first time since either of them had been thrown into this war-torn galaxy, the future felt real. Tangible. Alive. He reached up, touched her face. I'm with you, he said. And in her eyes, blazing like the twin suns of Rayla, he saw everything worth fighting for. The end. Fire loved this story. Want more epic romantic sci-fi tales where humans rise and fight back? Join my mailing list for exclusive HFY sagas and updates. The next war is already brewing, and you'll want to be there when it begins.